Hello, America. For people who are looking for an alternative in November, we have given you the chance to hear from the Libertarian Party, Gary Johnston, John McAfee, and also Austin Petersen. Last week, we had Austin on with us for, a half hour or so. We liked what he had to say, so we invited him to come to the studio. Today is his day. He's here with us, and he has an announcement that I think we were talking about before we went on the air. I think is probably the biggest mainstream event the Libertarian Party has seen in my lifetime. He's going to make that announcement right now.
I will make a stand. I will raise my voice. I will hold your hand. 'Cause we are one. I will beat my drum. I have made my choice. We will overcome. 'Cause we are one.
The fusion of entertainment and enlightenment. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Welcome to the program, Austin Petersen, running for president, Libertarian candidate. He is one of three. Your convention is next weekend, this coming weekend?
Yeah, this coming weekend over Memorial Day.
Okay. We've talked to all three candidates, and quite honestly, the other two kind of scare us a bit because they're for total open borders. Libertarians generally go right to, legalize all the drugs and everybody gets a prostitute. it's like
prostitute in every bag.
There'll be a prostitute in every pot.
Right, but we don't subsidize it.
Right. You don't
on your own dime.
Right. And so it becomes a little scary for those who are closer to the mainstream. Yeah. And I don't care if people have that, that position in libertarianism. Penn Jillette is a good friend of mine. He is this close to an anarchist. But, he doesn't want to rule my life. I don't want to rule his life. However, the mainstream of American populace is not there. They were probably 100 years ago, but the progressives took them to statism step by step. The way to win with libertarianism is to take them to libertarianism step by step, I believe. That is what you're doing, but that has got to be causing a lot of problems for you in the Libertarian Party.
Right. Yeah. Winning a war is a game of inches sometimes. And so for me, I very much come from the kind of Milton Friedman school where I believe everything that the libertarians say philosophically, but I want to propose policies that are going to get us there. And like you said, the socialists, the Fabian socialists specifically fight a game of inches, and they have been taking our liberties bit by bit. And I don't care what the purists of the party have to say about me because I am philosophically with them. But when it comes to governing, I am required to obey the Constitution of the United States as president, which means that there are some things that I may disagree with that I will have to enforce. I will enforce the law. And I've always said that if we just had a president who obeyed the Constitution, that would be the most libertarian president in history. And so, again, I always say to the libertarians, if you want to win, you're going to have to adopt some of these policies that Milton Friedman adopted. You're going to have to fight the Fed using the anti-inflation tactics that Milton Friedman came up with. We're going to have to fight fire with fire in a sense. And that doesn't mean that we need big government, but it does mean that we can say up front, this is what we believe philosophically, right. But then on the back, we need to propose some real policy changes so that we can get there.
So you have an announcement this morning, which is a little jaw-dropping on multiple fronts.
Right, yeah. So we got an email last week and a big check. We got an endorsement from Mary Madeline, who joined the Libertarian Party from the Republican Party. She was so disgusted by he who shall not be named. and she joined our campaign and said, what can we do? And I was like, well, wow, we weren't even courting her. So apparently she was attracted to my message, being the only pro-life, pro-constitution candidate who's running for the LP nomination. And so she's endorsed us and said, what can I do to help? And now I'm running like heck towards that nomination. And I think that I've got a pretty good shot at it this weekend.
This is pretty phenomenal. When Mary was on with us, she said she was going to the Libertarian Party, and I wasn't sure if she was making a statement or if she was really there. I mean, did you get that feeling? At first, I thought she is right there with the Libertarians. She's done with the GOP. But by the end of it, I wasn't sure if she really was. Did you get that feeling, Stu?
I mean, I think she's certainly fed up. I mean,
Yeah, I got that.
Was she is she a libertarian, or is she just fed up with the Republican
Correct.
Party? Right.
Correct.
I can see where you get that.
For her to endorse, I think this is probably, I mean, you get the Jesse Venturas, but do you know of anybody who is a Republican insider that has been so disgusted by the Republicans that they have not only left the party.
Not a prominent one. I can't think of one.
Not one.
Yeah. Well, you've got to read her endorsement because it's all about federalism. She's talking about Jefferson's vision of government. She's talking about why she wished that the Republican Party was the party of libertarianism, but how not only have libertarians been ejected from the Republican Party, but conservatives have been ejected from the Republican Party. Trump was right. It is no longer a conservative party. It is now a populist party. Unprincipled populists.
It's a progressive populist party.
The election now will come down to, should I take the nomination, it will be a Theodore Roosevelt Republican, progressive Republican, make America great again, American nationalism, and then a Wilsonian Democrat. So it's Theodore versus Woodrow, and I'm going to be out there like Calvin Coolidge saying, hey, I just want to leave everybody alone.
Right.
So it's an interesting race that we have set up for ourselves, and you know, I don't want to take over the government because I want to run people's lives. I want to do it so that I can leave people alone and let the business of the American people be business.
I mean, you're making Calvin Coolidge jokes. You are speaking the geek language of Glenn.
Yeah.
I know.
That's where we are.
Liberty nerd.
That is, I mean, we've been talking about that for a while, that this is the, you know, the Woodrow Wilson election.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the pro-life thing for a second? Because you just touched on it. This is a fascinating thing I always find with libertarians, and that the most prominent libertarian that I can, you know, the past 20 years is probably Ron Paul. And he was a guy who was pro-life, a libertarian that was pro-life. And I'm fascinated by why the default position for libertarians is the rights of the adult overwhelm the rights of the child. And every other interaction between two people, libertarians side on the side of the individual. However, in this particular instance, I think your view is the right one, in which we have to respect the life and the personal liberty of the child. But why is that out of the mainstream for libertarians?
Well, I think that there's always a knee-jerk reaction to anything government would do to be involved in people's personal lives. I think there's just an inherent terror that libertarians have when it comes to what government might do to legislate to stop abortions. Because, of course, you have Venezuela, where you have a tyrannical government and abortions, one size fits all, you know, completely banned. So I think from speaking from their side of things, that's what they're worried about. But for me, I'm trying to create the most ethical, virtuous philosophy that I can. And Ron Paul really changed my mind on this one, because he described the abortion procedure and how there was a still crying baby thrown into a dumpster. You cannot support that as a libertarian. You must be pro-life, I believe, because at a minimum, the duty of government, if it is to exist, should be limited strictly to protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You cannot have liberty without life. And so I've really come around on this. And I've adopted what we call the consistent pro-life ethic, which is a Catholic doctrine. I'm not Catholic, but I find a lot of solace in this teaching. It does get me in trouble with conservatives, though, because they'll say, hey, we love that you're pro-life with babies. But then, of course, I say that I'm also against the death penalty, because the government is not perfect. And if the government makes mistakes, you should not be able to make a mistake when it comes to the death penalty either. So then the conservatives were like, well, hey, you know, we don't like that. But I'm going to try and be as consistent as I can and try and adopt the most morally positive, virtuous ethic that I can. And I think that means being pro-life, and I'll advocate for that.
Okay, let's go to Pat, because he's the one with probably the biggest issues.
Yeah, you said something last week that troubled me, in that I think you said philosophically open borders appeals to you. As a person who's lived in a border state for a total of 12 years now, I don't understand that. Why? Why do open borders appeal to you? Why? How is it that anybody can come in here? We don't know who they are. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know why they're here. How is that appealing to anybody?
Because a free market in labor is just as effective as a free market in commodities. The idea is that what role does the government have to get involved between an employer and an employee? What I'm trying to do is to try and avoid the government stepping in and saying, you can't hire this person, you can't hire that person, because I would like a free market in labor. Now, I realize that some of these positions obviously are not going to happen in my lifetime, but what I would like to talk about is why I think Milton Friedman was right in many ways, because he favored illegal immigration. Why? Because in the 80s, at least, you could come here and you would not qualify for immigration benefits. That's changed. And you cannot have open borders in a welfare state. But the welfare state is the problem, not the immigrants. And my immigrant ancestors came through Ellis Island, and they had a very stringent security check, and they had a very stringent disease check. I think some of the refugees that came out this week showed that they were sick with tuberculosis. And even the most hardcore anarchist has to say, that's a violation of my property rights for you to bring someone in with an infectious disease. So it's important for us to get serious. If we're going to have an immigration policy, we need to incentivize legal immigration. If it takes 15 to 25 years to get here, you are going to have people breaking the law for the opportunity. And if you're running from a third world refugee, I mean, no one ever ran away from free market capitalism, okay? These people are fleeing for a reason. They come for the opportunities that are here. Let's not blame the immigrants. Let's blame the government who gives them welfare, and let's blame the government for the heavy redundancy that they have, the Department of Homeland Security, which is multiple layers of bureaucracy. We need to streamline the system, make it simpler, easier path to naturalization, and let's be what the Statue of Liberty says. You know, we need to be that free market country like we were.
Well, we're not the country that we were when the Statue of Liberty was built. We're a country of 320 million now, and we could easily be overwhelmed. There was a survey in Mexico of 120 million people. 1/3 of them would immigrate to the United States if they could. Now, that kind of influx, we can't handle everybody. We can't handle everything. We can't do everything.
Well,
We're a
that's
sovereign nation, and so there's that. And what about the Balkanization of America?
Well, you know, we have Mormons in this country that love their isolation, and we have Jews that love their isolation in Brooklyn, and I think that's one of the beautiful parts of the United States. I don't necessarily see Balkanization as a bad thing. We have multiple cultures here in the United States. And
It's never worked. Balkanization's
Why
never
not?
worked in a nation.
Oh, well, you know what? I disagree. I disagree. And I think that people...
Where has it worked?
Well, it's worked here in the United States, in Utah, for
Not
example.
Balkanized. And Utah
Yeah.
is part of the United States.
Well, of course it is, but these people want to have their own culture and their traditions, and they should be free to do so. And what's wrong with Mexican food if they want to come over here and bring us
No,
their
we're not
food?
talking about that. No, that's different.
No.
The first thing that the Mormons did, remember, they were chased out of the United States. They were literally chased with torches and guns. They
killed.
killed. They flee across the mountains and went to a different country. But what they did on the first day is they got together and they made a plan to hold a parade where the women, and I can't remember which was which, but the women carried the Declaration of Independence and the men carried the Constitution. And they held up and they said, don't count our troubles against these documents and these principles. It was the people that weren't living these. So there wasn't Balkanization. They wanted to live those principles. You won't find a more American group of people than patriotic than the people in Utah.
I agree.
The biggest 4th of July celebrations and parades are all in Utah. So it's not Balkanization. They embraced it. You could say that about the Jewish culture to some degree, but it's such a small culture that it doesn't impact. We're talking about
Hundreds of millions of people
that are coming to the United States that are being told, you don't even have to speak our language. Yeah. It's not about Mexican food. It's about, do you want to come here? When people came here in the turn of the century, it is for me. When people came here at the turn of the century, they wanted to be Americans. Yeah. If you want to be an American, that's what makes it work. The reason why the Democrats don't want you to have English as your official language is because they know they'll vote the same way they were voting in Mexico because they don't know the culture and the rules and the laws and the Constitution of the United States.
We absolutely must uphold the rules, traditions, laws, the Constitution of the United States. And I love my country. This is why I'm doing this. But when it comes to the cultures of the United States, I think we do need to be a bit more laissez-faire. That doesn't mean that I'm going to open up the borders. I simply cannot. The executive does not have that power. But I would work with Congress to streamline our immigration laws. Now, here's the truth, Glenn. You and I both know Republicans and Democrats are not going to do anything about immigration because Republicans want the labor and Democrats want the vote. I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to tell you what I feel and what I believe and what is true. I'm trying to hold up what I believe is a virtuous position, but I'm telling you right now that I will obey the laws of the United States. And I think that is the most important thing that I can do is to promise to be faithful to my oath to honor, protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution.
I mean, a lot of the illegal immigration problem, if we just enforce the laws we have now, would be taken
away. And if we did that, then it would probably be a lot more stringent than you might think. At the moment, there is a sort of like, they're ignoring the law.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's why we have so much disrespect, because our commander-in-chief right now is so weak.
All right, so I need to take a break. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about the idea that a vote for you is a vote for Hillary Clinton. And need a good answer, because a lot of people will even be pissed at us for even having you on.
Sure. Technically, isn't a vote against him also a vote for Hillary Clinton?
It's almost like we are in this world where anything is a vote for Hillary Clinton.
Right. If it's not what I want, it's a vote for Hillary Clinton.
Here we go.
Triple 727 back.
This is
The Glenn Beck Program.
All right, I want to talk to you about some more issues. I want to talk to you a little bit about the convention that's happening this weekend, because it's a three-man race in the Libertarian Party. The nominee is going to be selected this coming weekend. So I want to talk to you about the odds of you being selected. But before that, I've got 2 minutes. Tell me why a vote for you is not a vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, I mean, just from an actual technical perspective, if you drink an RC Cola, are you drinking a Coca-Cola? Is that a vote for Pepsi? It just doesn't make any sense. But the truth is that what do you really want? If you want to reshape the Republican Party, and if you want to eject the Trump conservatives, or whatever you call them, then Hillary Clinton victory would do that. The conservatives would be able, then Trump would be decimated and his people. You would show the weakness of that movement. The populists, the ones, the army of hate, I call them, behind Trump, would be destroyed. So in essence,
they would say that, but America would be destroyed because we know what Hillary Clinton's going to do.
But Hillary Clinton is it's what was the Alexander Hamilton quote? Better there be a leader that we are not responsible for, that we can oppose and do so with principles. I think that was his argument. So yes, I think that we were able to oppose Bill Clinton, and then what happened in his second term once he got cleaned out? All of a sudden it's welfare reform. So I think that Hillary Clinton is a much easier target to oppose, much harder to fight the enemy within. So it depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to fight some sort of a short-term victory and you have no eyes on the long term, well, I'm 35 years old and I got to live in this country for a long time. I'm trying to fight the long-term battle, and that's what I'm doing.
I don't know. I mean, this is my philosophy as well, that we would be able to withstand the onslaught of Hillary because the Republicans would unite against Hillary and slow her down. The Republicans are not going to unite against Donald Trump. If he goes awry, it is a fast track to trouble. A fast track to trouble, because there'll be enough Democrats that will throw in with him.
This is the Glenn
It's a cynical
Beck
strategy,
Program.
but
Merc.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Welcome to the program. Austin Petersen is with us. He is running for president of the Libertarian Party. He announced on the program that our good friend Mary Matlin has just endorsed him. That That is a huge, huge endorsement. You have a chance of winning at the convention because is it Gary Johnson that has 11% now? Yeah. Gary Johnson seems to be ahead in the only polls that we have seen.
Right.
What's really happening?
Well, the truth is I don't like talking smack, but that poll, 76% of the people didn't even know who he was. So in essence, it's a placeholder. You could put anybody in there. And even Governor Johnson has said Mickey Mouse polled at 30%. So anybody would poll great against these two candidates. And his unfavorability ratings were only matched by Donald Trump. I think that if you put me in there and the American people get a chance to be introduced to me and my constitutional positions and my pro-freedom positions, that they're going to say, oh, wow, this guy represents American values. I'm pushing for the American dream. And I do have a chance to win this thing, Glenn. I'll tell you what. We do have some very reliable internal polling. The rosiest projections right now show that I could take it on the first ballot if some historical projections of the delegates were to show up. But if that happens, it's a revolution. It's going to shake things up, just like the Mary Madeline endorsement, because I'm building bridges. I think I'm the only candidate, Glenn, that can get those never-Trump conservatives on board, that can get the moderate social democrats on board, and bring the libertarians on board. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be angry, just like you said. People are going to be upset that we're even talking right now. My people are like, how dare you talk to Glenn? And your people are going to be saying,
I don't get it. I really don't get it.
We got to do
all of the media
better.
on the big stage,
Yeah.
the mainstream media. We're probably the most libertarian friendly out of all of them. I'm not a purist libertarian. I'm a, if you will, an anti-progressive libertarian. I want to progressively move the dial back on what the progressives have done to our country and our Constitution. So I'm not one of these guys who, Gary Johnson was in I think it was the Wall Street Journal saying, I'm driving high and I'm proud to be driving high.
Is that
Right?
a fair characterization?
Well, yes, it was. He was talking about getting high on the campaign trail. And
Yeah, I mean,
not
that's not going to be, that's not going to appeal. Nobody wants to go into the voting booth. I shouldn't say that. Very few people want to go into the voting booth and say, I'm for the weed party.
Yeah.
And even though I am to the position of the war on drugs does not work. It is the same as prohibition. You're getting the same results, but instead of Al Capone in Chicago, you have him on the border. And we've created the same kind of nightmare that we did in the 1920s with prohibition. It doesn't work. The war on poverty, it doesn't work. None of these things work. But you can't say to the American people who back in 1900 might have understood this, in 2016, where they've got the IV lines of government drugs coursing through their veins, you can't say to them, well, we're just going to legalize everything. You can't do it.
I don't want to necessarily just be the party of weed. I want to be the party of small business. Small business is the driver of the American economy. Free market economics is what is going to solve the problems that we have in society today. If the Libertarian Party becomes the party of small business, we will win. We'll have a great victory. And the Second Amendment.
So let's talk about the Second Amendment and let's talk about the First Amendment.
Right.
Because it's so strange because the libertarians hate us and many in our audience hate the libertarians. They don't trust the libertarians. And they don't trust the libertarians on a few things. One of them is the right to practice my religion. It seems as though libertarians just don't like religious people. And so when it comes to a baker saying, I can't be, I'll make you donuts, I'll make you cakes, I'll make you anything, but I can't participate in your ceremony because it violates my religious belief. Are the libertarians going to do that? Because I see, who was it, which one of them said the Nazi cake?
Gary Johnson, yeah.
Gary Johnson.
Talk about that exchange, because
Yeah.
that was a big moment in the first debate.
Right. So I didn't know that Governor Johnson held these positions when it came to freedom of association. And in the debates, we were talking about whether or not Christian bakers should be forced to bake a cake for a gay wedding. And he argued, yes, that they should. So I kind of just threw out the, line, do you think a Jew should be forced to bake a cake for a Nazi? And he said, that's my contention. And I kind of laughed. I thought, there's no way he really believes this because he must not understand the law, because not even, that's more authoritarian than Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton on that position. And I realized that he meant it, he's been doubling and tripling down on this issue. Everyone should have freedom of conscience. Glenn, when I was a young man, my mother died, and she was victimized by a pharmacist who diluted her chemotherapy drugs. I lost my faith, and I never went back. But as I grew, and I was angry, but then when I got older, I've cooled and calmed, and now I see the threat to religious freedom that is a threat to my freedom as well. And so I will defend the rights of people even if I don't agree with them. And that's what it means to be a libertarian. And that is controversial. And being a pro-life secularist just makes no one happy, but I don't care because I would rather be honest. I'm not running for president so I can, just get elected. If I did that, I'd support Trump. But when it comes to religious freedom must be sacrosanct, and we must defend it for ourselves and for everyone else. I don't agree with you, but I defend your right to believe it.
It's the only time that defending somebody's right matters.
Right.
When you disagree, it is that's when it counts.
Yes, and the Nazi cake issue is a big issue. It might be the thing that sinks his candidacy, and that and the Second Amendment issue.
Because he just put
Bill Weld.
Bill Weld up on as the vice president.
Yeah.
Who is anti-gun.
Yeah, he was. I thought that
How
perhaps
does a libertarian take this point of view?
It's hard to understand what he was thinking. I think it was something about access to money, they said, which, again, the Liberty Movement has funded me tremendously, and I haven't had to go to any special interests. And we've been doing fantastic with fundraising simply by doing live streams and interviews like this. But when it comes to the gun issue, Governor Johnson started talking about mental health checks, background checks for guns. And what you didn't see in the Fox debate was that in the commercial break, there was a soldier who said, Governor, I have PTSD and the government wants to take my guns.
Right.
And do you think I have a mental illness? And it's not a mental illness. It's a mental affliction. It's something that happens to you. You're not mentally ill because you have PTSD. And he wants to, they're going to take away guns from our veterans, the same freedoms that they're fighting for.
Yes.
They want to take these guns. And, they're talking about assault rifles. Well, the truth is that they say, oh, well, we don't want to take guns that are used for hunting. Well, these guns are used for hunting. They're used for hunting tyrants. Because the Second Amendment, there are no restrictions. It says shall not be infringed. And
They're also used for hunting. I use my assault rifle for hunting.
Sure, of course.
It just looks different.
Yeah, well, it
just looks different.
I love being on the farm with my AR-15. I built mine last year. We go out and shoot possums and hunt with my father, and it's a great American pastime.
You've lost the possum vote now.
Sorry.
He hunts possum.
Yeah. This is American. This is what America wants. They want somebody who defends the Second Amendment. Even Democrats, for the most part, are pretty Second Amendment heavy. You'll get the blue dogs and stuff like that. It's a minority of people in the United States that are really the gun grabbers. And it's amazing that one of them might end up on our libertarian ticket. This is why I'm fighting so hotly for this nomination, because I want to defend the hardcore libertarian position on all these issues.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a tough question. When you were coming on, I can't tell you how many people said, have you seen this video? And it's a video of you doing some interview with some radio guy. I don't even know who he is. Liberty, he just has the...
Anarchist guy, yeah.
Okay, he just has the don't tread on me flag behind him. So I don't know who he is. Do you know what interview I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where you guys sounded like two 13-year-old boys.
Right.
I mean, embarrassingly bad.
Sure.
For both of you. How do you respond to that?
Well, what happened, Glenn, was that this gentleman shared a nude photograph of a friend of mine, and I had called into that radio show to give him a piece of my mind, and so the truth is that I did fly off the handle, and I was angry at him because he was exploiting, for his own profit, a friend of mine and her photograph, and so I called...
How did he get a nude photograph of
I don't know, but all I know is that he was posting it everywhere and sharing it on his website, and so, I apologize to people who I've offended for my use of language, but I think that a lot of women who have had this happen to them might be happy that they had somebody come in and step up for them, even if they use some foul language. But I think he was disgusting and despicable, and I let him have it. And, would I do it again? Would I take it back? Of course I would. But I still stand up ethically for what I was doing, because he was trash. He was a slime ball, and I called him out.
I will say that interview probably does help you with the Trump vote.
It really does.
Right.
Really
well, it's if that's the worst I got against me, then I'm a Boy Scout. I mean, I'm going up against a guy with 8 women in Belize and a potential murder rap, and and Governor Johnson's a pretty good guy, but again, we're trying to run for commander in chief, not to be smoking doobies while we're on Air Force One. It's amazing because I'm the youngest candidate.
Are you against? So tell me about what you feel about the Colorado marijuana law.
Great. Yeah, I'm really a hardcore libertarian on these issues. I do believe that we should get the government out of the business of regulating what we do with our personal lives and our bodies. I honestly think drugs are dangerous because they're illegal. That's why we had bathtub gin in the 1930s, the Prohibition era. If you knew, drug dealers don't check IDs. If you knew what dosage you were getting, because you're going to do it anyway, maybe we won't have all these kids overdosing on all these dangerous drugs and chemicals if there was some sort of system that allowed them to access the drugs that they're going to use. And I don't think that you should be in the business of subsidizing people who are chemically addicted or are giving them welfare. I don't agree with that. But I think that it's important for us to be compassionate and to govern out of love for one another. And I don't know that we are loving our fellow man by incarcerating them.
You should look into the what Spain did with their laws. I don't hear anybody in the West talking about Spain. They have completely changed their laws. They legalized all drugs.
Decriminalization? Or?
Decriminalization, and
Right.
it drove the addiction rate of heroin into the ground.
Yeah.
It's quite an amazing story in Spain that nobody in the West cares to look at because it turns all of the lies that we hear about the war on drug upside down.
Yeah.
What's coming in our economy, and I believe, the last time we had a crash, we took the biggest banks that were too big to fail, and we cut them in half, and we just piled them in and made the remaining banks even bigger. Donald Trump is on the record saying he would nationalize the banks. What would you do in a massive financial crisis?
Liquidation. That's the name of the game. You cannot be too big to fail in this country. This is why Democrats are taking the moral high ground. This is how Bernie Sanders is able to build a broad-based movement, because they diagnose the problem correctly, but their cure is more government. And the truth is that we need to allow these corporations to be submitted to the laws of supply and demand. This is how poor and middle class actually work their way up in society, because when the rich make a mistake like this and they become insolvent, then you break up those banks and the poor and the middle class get a chance to buy in. The stock value drops, and then we get a chance to come in and buy up these assets. We need, big corporations don't like capitalism, Glenn. They don't like capitalism because they know that means that they can fail. And what we have now is we have socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. If my small business goes under, nobody's going to bail me out. And we should apply the laws of supply and demand uniformly. We've had financial crises in this country before we had a Federal Reserve. And those crises would occur, and they last maybe for a year, 2 years. But it was only after the Federal Reserve that we started having Great Depressions. And even Ben Bernanke said, "You're right, we did it, we're sorry, and we won't do it again," referring to the Great Depression. So I would love to end the Fed, but when it comes to bailouts and stimulus, it's the Keynesian fallacy. It's wrong. It's all about Hayek, and we need to start having more interstate competition. It's no longer a battle of superstate versus superstate during the Cold War, Marx versus Keynes. I want to see Keynes versus Hayek, and that is a free market system, laissez-faire, and allow corporations to compete or rise and fall according to the laws of supply and demand.
Somebody wants to get involved in your campaign. Somebody wants to go and become a delegate for you. How do they do it?
AustinForPresident.com. Very simple. Go to Austin for President. You can make a donation today. You can register as a volunteer. If you can be in Orlando, that would be fantastic. The more people who are there carrying Austin Petersen signs, the better. If you own a blog, write about us, to just talk about us. The window is closing. There's a very small window of opportunity for the constitutionalists, for the limited government types, to help me get a victory, and then we can have a revolution this year.
Web address again?
Yeah, AustinForPresident.com.
He's a brave fellow. Austin Petersen, brave guy, coming in and speaking his mind and quite honestly saying things that are not going to help him. I mean, being on this show is not going to help him with the Libertarian Party.
It might help him in the general, but it's not going to help him with libertarians, probably.
Mm-mm.
And neither will the Mary Matlin.
That's like a death knell.
Yeah, that should have maybe waited until after this weekend, but I don't know.
But I think it's one of those things
He's
where
so much better than the other two libertarians.
I would agree.
So much better.
Yes.
He is where the Libertarian Party. The
Should be.
Libertarian Party needs to wake up to reality.
Yes.
And reality is, Penn Jillette is the best on this. We had an argument, and we were arguing about, I don't remember what it was, something where it was darn near, anarchy. And he said, "Glenn, you and I will both be dead by the time this argument really even will make a difference." He's like, "We have so many things. We have at least 30 years of stuff that we could do together that we won't argue about. And by the time we get the government so small where we're arguing about the Constitution or Articles of Confederation, we're dead.
Yeah, the bottom line.
That's where libertarians need to be. They need to understand you've got to reverse this process, and you're not going to do it through revolution. That's a bad idea. And you have to take it in baby steps. Start moving us in the right direction. I think he can do that. Him in a real debate between those two would be refreshing.
This is the Glenn Beck Program. Mercury.